it went up during the final, not down. Sopel scores! Off the face-off, Brent Sopel has blasted one that has tied the game.
Chicago very late in the second period. Shoes are wild.
Welcome to Genuine Life Recovery. We're here to help you and your loved ones overcome addictions and other addiction-related mental health challenges. In this show, we dive into the physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual aspects of addiction, mental health, recovery, family dynamics, codependency, and more. You can listen on your favorite app or at jodiestevens.org. Hey, friends. Thanks for hanging out. Genuine Life Recovery. Welcome back. I'm so excited you're here today. We're talking about self-esteem. We're talking about recovery, and we're talking about dyslexia, kind of the intersection between all of that. Now, if you are not dyslexic, that's okay, because today we're going to have a lot of reasons and lessons about the impact of self-esteem on addiction and recovery. And I'm super excited because I am joined by past NHL hockey player Brent Sopel. Brent's, for my California peeps that have no idea what that is, that's the National Hockey League, right?
Very impressive.
I know. Brent's not only an amazing athlete, he's also a miracle of God because he is sober today from alcohol, perhaps other substances. Not sure about that part. And he's brilliant like me because, we're both dyslexic. He founded an organization called the Brent Sopel Foundation. 1 in 5 kids are dyslexic, and only 5% of them are actually diagnosed. So Brent is on a mission to change that, helping kids and families struggling with dyslexia. So Brent, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could be here. And you are in Chicago. So what's happening with the weather? Is it storming?
Freezing rain. So
yeah.
I'm more of a winter guy. I don't like summer, so it's perfect for me.
Right? Yeah. So hockey. So we have some stuff in common. I grew up watching hockey in Anchorage. So I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. Saw all these games at the Sullivan Arena. Went to college in Fairbanks. So hockey was a big deal. And I guess I always assumed that the games I was watching were like NHL games. Yeah, no, they weren't. So I guess Alaska doesn't have an NHL team.
No,
or they just got one or something from Seattle, or I don't even know what the deal is with that. What is the deal with that?
I don't think Fairbanks could get the corporate sponsors you need to be a whole NHL team. But I know I have friends and guys I played with went up to Fairbanks, and summertime you can golf for 24 hours. Great little spot.
Yeah. Have you been there?
No, I haven't been up there. I'm from Saskatchewan, so there's like a lot of similarities. Grew up on the farm, so I know a lot of guys have been up there. I wish back in my drinking days, though, I would have been up there.
Yeah, well, and that's the situation. We're both sober from alcohol because that's what you do in Alaska. You drink, you ski, you ski and drink. Or, when I was in Fairbanks, like the hockey was a big thing, whereas it's usually football somewhere else, or you do that. But it was interesting because my best friend's dad was a hockey coach. And so she did figure skating, and he had an ice rink in his backyard. Is that what you had in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, it was the same weather. I think last week it was minus 63.
Right.
A lot of similarities. Everybody thinks that Canada's national sport is hockey. It's not. It's lacrosse, but that's all. Really, we only have like a couple months of summer. So hockey, pretty much every elementary school had an outdoor rink.
Wow. Okay. And so you grew up skating, got into the NHL, and I want to get into some of that too. But so we're both dyslexic. So for you, when did you first realize that reading and writing were more difficult for you than other kids?
I didn't get diagnosed until I was 32.
Wow. Okay.
That happened is got my daughter tested. So back to your original question is, I don't remember. I knew I hated school. My education probably doesn't take me past grade 8. I was reading again to grade 4 level in high school. I told I was dumb and stupid, and that's where my hockey kind of came in, is where I lived on the ice. because it was the only good thing I was good at. You know, I knew I struggled early. My mom did most of my homework in high school. I remember grade 3 picking up and throwing a desk at a kid. Now I can connect dots now. What was going on? No idea what it was there. You know, somebody once said to me, "It's like, well, why don't you just tell me what you see?" Now, what do you mean? What I see? I see what I see. I didn't know anybody else saw it differently, so I just thought I was dumb.
Oh, yeah. And I can totally relate to that. So I was diagnosed when I was 5, but incorrectly because my problem was mathematical and spatial. So I was in this dyslexic school, Slingerland, where we would trace letters. And I mean, it was great, but I was always an avid reader. And my dad at the time, well, earlier, was a math teacher, of course. And so it was this thing like, I don't understand why you don't get this, right? Did you get that a lot?
Well,
I don't understand why. You know, I'm like, Dad, I don't know either, because if I knew, why don't you tell me what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was so frustrating. And I'm sure you heard that because you're like, well, I don't know why I don't get it either, right? You know what I mean?
The common words are you're dumb, stupid, and lazy. You know, so I call it the 5 Ds. You know, ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia. So
what are those?
So those are the 5 common dyslexias.
So I have the
dysgraphia is the writing portion of it.
Mine's mathematical, and I cannot, like, so if we're driving around, I can get lost in a circle. And if I take, you know, a wrong turn one time, then I keep taking the wrong turn because I can't, you know, I don't know.
Well, that's you know, that's the part, that's dyslexia. So dyscalculia is the math portion of it.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, you know, everybody wants to talk about the big words of neurodiversity or you're neurodivergent. I don't use those words because, you know, as soon as you Google that up, first come up is autism. So this neurodiverse word came up in 1998. Julie Springer, she's an autism activist, tagged it. And everybody's just taken off with it. Now, for us dyslexics, we don't get any support. We don't get any financial support. We get nothing. So why are we going to group ourselves into something that gets all the support? So I try and break us away from of that. 40% of us dyslexic have ADHD. So that's why I group the fifth. So I call it the 5 Ds, and I got 4 of the 5.
So what are they all again? You mentioned the math one. So okay.
Dyslexia, dysgraphia. So just think graphic writing. That's the writing portion.
Okay.
So,
right.
You know, like chicken scratch, can't read it.
Okay.
So it's a process from the brain to the hand. Dyscalculia, the math.
Right, that's me.
Dyspraxia, the verbal, and ADHD.
So ADHD is part of this. Is so interesting. And I hear what you're saying about the neurodiverse, but what was kind of cool for me, just at least about hearing that, because I'm 52 and I didn't realize that, you know, I knew I was dyslexic, but I didn't understand that I learned and actually thought differently. Like I didn't, and you know, the way that, and see if you can relate to this or if this makes sense, the way we read. So this was brand new to me. So like, for instance, if you're listening to this, friends, so like the dog jumped over the fence, right? Well, I don't have a visual word for the, right, as a kid. So I'll just throw that away, and, you know, because it's the beginning of the, right. And then dog, okay, I got it. Jumped. Yeah, I think so. Over. Yeah. The, oh no, I don't have a word for that. I got to go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. And so I finally realized through that process of being, you know, called neurodiverse or whatever, that was actually what was happening to me, and all this stuff I had to do to overcompensate. Can you relate to that? Is that
100%? You know, it's, you know, and the way I approach things, obviously, I agree with you. You know, it's, it's good, that you can, think differently. But I'm trying to go on a bigger purpose.
Uh-huh.
And, everybody knows that, what autism is. And they've got their day. They got everything.
Yeah.
So they get all the resources. We don't. So trying to get more focus on us. You see, yes, we learn differently and it's great, but we still get clumped in to the neurodivergent category. So
Uh-huh.
for me as a foundation is just taking a little bit different approach to how can I get the word, dyslexia said more? How can I get more understanding with it? And the hardest part is, being misunderstood every day.
Right.
The biggest thing is that if you don't have it, dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia, you can't tell me. You don't know. You've got no idea.
Right.
Just like I can't tell a cancer patient how they feel.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem in our education system is people that don't have it are trying to tell us what we need. And they are, talking about the reading. Dyslexics don't read, we memorize. So it's a processing, and everybody just thinks it's flipping your B's and D's. There's so much more that comes. A lot of us don't know our lefts from our rights. 65% of us are addicted to drugs and alcohol. 89% of suicide notes left are dyslexic.
Oh, gosh.
I shouldn't be picking up a desk in grade 3 and throwing it at a kid.
Yeah.
But that was my frustration and anger at such a young age. And I always say, learning disorders are the number one contributor to mental health. We're born with dyslexia. You're not born with depression or anxiety.
Right.
So we kick off our mental health.
Oh, I love that. Gosh, that's so true.
And that's why, to me, the mental health world treatments aren't getting treated. Because if you don't, so for me, you go to a counselor, if you don't go to someone who I don't counsel out of a book, I counsel out of experience.
Yeah.
So if you're saying to a counselor, if they are just blowing you off, and I call it, they're gaslighting, you get pissed off because they're counseling out of page 122 instead of the experience. And most of the people that are teaching, talking about mental health, why do we have mental health? Not just mental health. Why? So don't rip off the flower. Let's get the roots. And that's a question that nobody asks, nobody approaches. Yeah. How did we get here? Like, my addiction is my dyslexia. I had my first beer at 5. And I knew immediately I was different, right? So this took the differentness away. I love drugs and alcohol because then I'm not different. I can be normal for, what I think normal is. And, when you get laughed at your whole life and that self-esteem is number one. I don't have any. Never have. I was successful. Still didn't connect with anybody. You tell a girl in high school she's fat for 4 years, you're going to believe that the rest of your life. I was told I was dumb, so that's how I live.
Well, and what's so hard about it, Brent, is our brains form when we're kids, right? So it's you're kind of wired for trauma. You're kind of wired for that, and it's so hard to undo it. And I totally hear what you're saying because I went to therapy for codependency. My brother died of alcoholism I went to 12 steps. My husband's been sober. It wasn't until like this age that I realized the connection between the dyslexia, because it was just that separate thing, like, right? Oh, I'm dyslexic. And then I had to go in like you're the big hockey star, right? I'm the big radio star and I've got this false front and, I'm doing all this and I got to like when I go on stage, I got to memorize every line because if I don't get it perfect, you're going to see how stupid I really am. Like that's what I felt like. And now I know I'm not stupid, right? I mean, but it's still so hard. Did you find that you're performing, you're playing hockey, people want your autograph. And so you got this front going on, was that something that you can relate to, sort of having the false front?
Oh yeah. That, obviously being a public figure, you're attacked in a different form. For myself is, I didn't find out till I was 32, but I was still playing hockey. So I didn't care. I just got the resources for my daughter. So I didn't dive into my dyslexia till I was almost 40 when I
Right.
retired. So now I'm retired. I got divorced. Now I got to try and go find a job. Never done a job. I don't have a resume. Couldn't do any of that. So that's when my addiction
Mm.
took off. My best friend loved it. Loved my drugs. Getting I almost died before 40, so I had to get sober. And for me, let me ask you. I believe drug and alcohol addiction is not hereditary. It's trauma based, childhood
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah.
And mine's I was born with it, and it's hereditary. So it came from somewhere. So it comes in the family. So where did it come
Yeah.
from? Is if your dad's an alcoholic, you're abused. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So I had to get sober, and I had to be okay and start understanding what got me to rehab and what my issues were. So
Yeah.
that's when I started learning more about myself and dyslexia and connecting dots of
Yeah.
why now. Okay, now I know why, and it makes sense why I was doing what I was doing back then. And that's why I
Yeah.
started the foundation. I never want a kid to feel what I do every day.
Yeah. Well, and what's so interesting is I got my MS in addiction counseling, and you got the DSM, and you get all these things that, 1 through 10, A, B, C, D, and oh, what causes addiction? Is it the environment? Well, yeah, I grew up in Alaska. Is it genetics? Well, yeah, my grandpa's an alcoholic, my uncle's now, is it biology? Well, yeah. Is it trauma? Well, yeah. You know so it's all of those things, right? And that's what I always want people to understand is it's all those things, right? But there are risk factors. And so like for you, it's you've got this freezing environment where people like to drink, you've got trauma, you're told you were stupid. So these are kind of the things for you to work through, whereas with somebody else it could be something totally different. And so that's do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're all different, and it's all
But
a different mix of stuff because we're complicated. You can't There's no way to like put a pin on who we are. Does that make sense?
and to stay sober and be okay, you've got to go back and clean out your closet. I like to say
Yeah.
is, and you got to be okay with who you are, fall in love with yourself. And if you don't go
Yeah.
back and be okay with all those steps and limits, then I call it, it's a dragon and still locked in that closet. And life isn't easy no matter who you are.
Yeah.
But, for us with learning disorders, you feel right away you're different. You're that kid. And that at a young age takes a toll. And when you don't realize and you're misunderstood every day, it takes a toll training.
Mm. Tell me what school was like for you. For me, I had teachers say, well, I had one teacher tell my mom, your daughter will never amount to anything. Or this was my favorite. She just spaces out, like she's just spaced out, because
ADHD.
I would blank out during tests because I had anxiety and I would freeze. Like one time I wrecked a car, like I would
Yeah.
freeze. And I thought, I don't know what I don't know what the hell I thought. And years later, I was like, when I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety and panic attacks, I was like, I was having anxiety when I was like a little kid,
And let
and
me
that's
ask,
the teachers just thought so it wasn't that I was spaced out or dumb. It was that, with my dad saying, why can't you do this? And I was just so scared that I couldn't even open my mind. And what was that like for you? I mean, everybody who's dyslexic has those stories, right?
you talk about general anxiety. We don't have any anxiety when we're good at something. And when you
Yeah.
struggle at the simplest things, so this is how I'd like to break things down further. Okay, general anxiety. Okay, why? What does that mean? And where does it all come
Means
from?
you're generally anxious all the time.
You know, but you're never anxious in where you're comfortable and having fun and good at something.
Well, for me, being in broadcasting, yeah, I
That's
was always anxious, but it was fun, but I was always anxious. Yeah. I think I'm anxious all the time, but that's a whole nother story.
because
But
in broadcast, that paper could be slid across the table at any point in time for you to read. And that's what I always say for myself is when I came out and put on that ice, I knew I'd never have to read a sentence or do a math problem, so I could fully let go.
I see what you mean. So you could still get the jitters like going
Oh,
on stage,
what?
but what you're saying is, yeah, like no, I hear what you mean. It was like, don't let them,
Oh,
don't let me have to figure the tip.
yeah.
Don't
Oh.
we do all these fundraisers because I was at a Christian. I was with the Fish, the Salem Media Group, and we do all these fundraisers, and you're always doing this, thank gosh for calculators, but it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
don't let me here, you do the math and I'll do the ask, right?
Mhm.
So
And
but did you
that's anxiety. Like, oh my God, how can I, from young, I'm trying to write an email. There's a word I want to write, but I can't figure out how to spell it. So then you go and change the sentence. Like, those are the things that we think of. That's anxiety. These are I try and find out the why in all situations. There's always a why. It just doesn't happen.
yeah
The more that we know, the more we can be okay.
yeah
And everybody's got things going on. But if you don't know what's going on, it's tough every single day. And then I tell people, just think how many times a day you read. And I'll try and struggling every single time.
yeah
It's a lot.
but I also think the sheer amount of effort
Mm.
that we put into
Mm.
things
Mhm.
is pretty cool in some ways. I mean, look at what you're doing. You started a foundation, you played for the NHL. You're obviously quite brilliant. You want to figure things out. Most people are just, I always tell people, in the therapeutic world, it's okay. You
Yeah.
don't have to dig all into this stuff. You just figure out what you're feeling, and that'll be good. But you're deep. You want to dig into this stuff. You're probably
It's
very creative. So I mean,
for the
did you ever?
foundation, because it's kids and what's the next step and how can I change the world? The more understanding we have, is the better because the people that are running, the researchers, they don't have it.
Right.
So it's trying to show them that piece that they don't understand. And you're right. Life isn't easy.
Yeah.
But if we're sitting there and not knowing why something's happening, how can we prevent that? And
Yeah.
dyslexia, we all have an extra empathy chip. We're all hard workers. It made me who I am, absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
But if I can give a kid in grade 2 or grade 3, or if I can give a parent that doesn't have it some more understanding to them, to be able to connect to their kid. Because I've got parents that look dead in my face and say, I don't have a connection with my kid. And I can say, I didn't have a connection with a person until I was 46 years old
Wow.
because there's no understanding.
Yeah. Oh my
So it's,
gosh.
and for me, it's, trying to do something bigger, a bigger purpose, the foundation.
Yeah.
And when it's the second most common thing in the world next to cancer, and nobody even knows what the word is, something's missing. And I tell my story honestly, and my story's not about me. It's about the little kid sitting at that desk right now. And I
Yeah.
called it 8 hours in an electric chair. I hated life going to school.
Yeah. 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 Wow. You talked about in an article I read about hockey brain. What's that?
As you referenced, we're born with our brain wired differently.
Yeah.
We're born with our right brain wired. I call it the normal people read with their left. We read with our right, but we have other skills. And
I didn't even know that. Wow.
so
I just learned something. I mean, I knew I was right-brained, but I didn't know I read with the right brain, but it makes sense because of the visual thing. Yeah.
I try and kind of take it out of doctor's terms so people can understand it. They don't have it. It's like we read with our right, and the words are coming up to the top of our brain, and like a little bowl of spaghetti, or how the wiring is, and that's where the letters and words get mixed up. It's for me. I always have to try and get visuals and people to understand what I'm talking about because they can't see it. you visually see something, somebody, broken leg or somebody in a wheelchair, you can relate to them because you can see it.
Yeah.
Us,
Yeah.
you can't.
Wow. So hockey brain. Sorry, I
No,
completely
so, my
went in another
anticipation.
direction, which
Yeah.
I do. It's the dyslexic show. What?
Oh, man.
Hello?
Yeah. And going back to my brain, our brain's wired differently. Anticipation. You 3D image. Almost like a Tetris. Our brain was wired differently, and I was able to spatial awareness use that to my strength. I knew where the puck was going kind of before it was going. I knew time and space, and that's all my dyslexic brain were able to use those tactics to get further. It's kind of like chess. So that my
Right.
dyslexic brain 100% allowed me to make it, but 100% allowed me to
Yeah.
have trauma. And that's kind of how I connect the dot and why, I talk about it. Our brains are wired differently. That's okay. Everybody's got strengths and everybody's got weaknesses.
That's so interesting because it explains why I'm really good at certain like card games, and I could never understand that, or that I hope this doesn't offend anyone, that dominoes or whatever, that it's a game called Mexican Train, where it's you use the dominoes and it's basically patterns.
Hmm.
And I would just kick everybody's butt.
Hmm.
Or pool.
Yeah.
Every once in a while I just go clear the table. And that you said that, it kind of makes sense. I just, but yeah, the pattern recognition. But it was so weird for me because I was like, oh, I can't do math, but I just beat you in poker, or I beat you. You know what I mean?
And one of the most dyslexics have an amazing memory. So we're able to memorize things.
Oh, I can't remember. I
Well,
can't.
you did with those cards, right? That's why I said we never
Yes.
read.
It didn't feel like I memorized it though, because if you said what were the cards, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Way
Like,
of doing it.
wow. That's crazy. Of course, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
story.
That's the foundation, and those are the kind of things that we dig into,
Yeah.
just to try, do some legislation and laws, and we got to dig in this way, is
Yeah.
because the people that don't have it will never understand it. So we have to find ways for them to understand the roots to be able to make impacts. So that's why I always end up going, so deep in different ways. Because if I'm not able to, then I'm not going to be able to make the best impact in, in certain way, education or schools or districts or what it is. Because the other person standing next to me is just like, just do it. Like, just write it down. I can't. And they think you're lying. And I have to show them kind of ways because they can't see it.
So we're still not getting it in the schools, is my understanding. I was 5. They said, "Oh, she flips her letters or whatever." And I'm in Alaska, and it's the 70s. I always say I was a dyslexic kid who grew up in Alaska in the 70s, or haha. But it sounds like they're still not figuring it out. They're still not really helping people with dyslexia.
What they always talk about, I think they say, the brain, we only know like 10% of the capacity of what the brain is. And that's that's dyslexia. And the hardest part in the dyslexic community is that 100% of the education for dyslexics are created by non-dyslexics. So they're telling us wrong information.
Why? Where are they? How come they're not involved in that?
Because they don't care about kids. They're scientists and researchers, so it's their lab coat, their paper, keeping their doctor.
Yeah.
So it's you can do as much research as you want. I'm a 48-year expert in this because I live with this.
No, I mean, where are the dyslexic people doing? How come they're not part of that group? Because they don't think we're smart enough, maybe? Is that what you...
I think that's the hardest for us is we don't think we're smart. We don't connect, right? So everybody thinks we're dumb. So there's not a very lot of people that are public about their dyslexia. And when I say public, meaning going next level of talking about how you got there and the
Right.
traumas. So somebody can say I'm dyslexic. There's a difference between that and then explaining what really the whole process to get there. So it's dyslexia. The word's been around for over 100 years, in the foundation, and we're trying to do something that's never been done. So it's really kind of groundbreaking. So somebody's got to do it at some point in time. We've got to teach them what we see because they don't.
Wow. So I want to hear about your recovery story a little bit too for our listeners and how you got sober, but also tell me first about the foundation since we're on that. Like when you say we're doing something that's never been done, so what does that mean?
Well, 99% of the charity foundations out there for dyslexia are ran by non-dyslexics.
Right. Okay.
For dyslexia, dyslexic advocating for dyslexics.
Mm. And what are some of the things you're trying to do? Obviously, just help the school, right? The teachers understand, and I have a story about, like, I had one teacher say something. He said, she can write, and he gave me an A+. And he wrote the she because he knew it would go to my mom. I was 17. I was never the same. I went to college. I got a journalism degree. One word. It was one teacher. It was one day. And it is still to this day the best day of my life. And I don't know if he saw something in me, but it doesn't take, like, they always say it doesn't take an army, or maybe it does, but you know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's just a cool guy like you, just helping a kid, like you said, and it's the same way in recovery. It's like, okay, we can do all the DSM stuff, and I understand all that stuff, but at the end of the day, it's like, do you give a crap? You know what I mean?
He believed in you.
Yeah.
And I didn't believe in myself, so somebody saw.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part of the kind of dyslexia stuff is with no self-esteem.
Yeah.
But we got none, because you grab that first book when you're 8 months. That's when we start struggling.
Yeah.
So that's how long we struggle, and that's why we get to the point, and that's why that one teacher, a non-dyslexic, doesn't get hurt the way we get hurt, and we don't get saved the way they get saved.
Wow. So what are some things that the foundation's trying to do? I know self-esteem is big.
That's always number one.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a doctor or, pilot, or if you're so dark, you're not learning. So we need to get you up to self-esteem and loving yourself before I focus on, reading and writing, because when we have self-esteem, we can do anything. So that's a different approach. Not everybody talks about learning. You can't learn if we're that deep. So, a lot of it is awareness. Only 20% ever get diagnosed. 80% get diagnosed after college. So, it's awareness, advocacy, understanding, relatability, all these things that aren't out there. I talked to a neuropsych the other day. Dyslexia right now is 1 in 5 in hereditary. So autism is 1 in 45 right now, not hereditary. So
1 in 5. Oh my gosh.
And when I talked to her last week, she's looking closer to 1 in 4. So you think 25 kids in a classroom, there's 4, 5, 6 dyslexics.
And that suggests to me that it's sort of normal. That maybe the education system's wrong, not the dyslexic. Just saying.
And that's what the foundation's trying to do is, how many people realize there's a second way to think? Like a doctor, it's only this way. Our brain isn't that way.
I still don't know how to think, Brent. Like, I still don't know. Like, are you a visual learner? Are you audio? I don't know. I can't figure it out.
Well, and most people think, I always talk about love languages. There's 5, right? There's, different ways to learn. Are you visual? If you're being taught the way you don't learn, just like if you're somebody, your loved one, your husband, your boyfriend, wife, are giving you gifts of affirmation and that's not your love language, you get pissed off. He's not listening to me.
Right.
Same kind of thing, in all this. So
Wow.
I can't change anything till I've got understanding.
Yeah.
Nobody changes anything, things that they don't understand.
See if you can relate to this. So my dad, really high intelligence. He'd be like, "Okay, Joe, now we're gonna, do this math problem," and he'd say, "So you can add this and this and and then he'd go, and then if you want to check yourself, you just take this and you subtract it, you know what I mean? Like you add it and then you oh my gosh!" And he would and it's like I didn't even get like the first way.
Well, yeah.
Like you said, it's like they have no idea.
No,
I mean, he still has no idea. They still don't even know who I am. God love, I love you.
In class, Sam drove 10 miles. I got no idea where Sam is. Show me where Sam is.
Oh, story problems were the worst. Oh my gosh.
Right.
I stopped at long division.
Oh.
Like, I'm done. Yeah. In college, I took logic because for me, I was good at language. So I took logic because you're adding and subtracting like language so I could just stay away from numbers. I mean, did you have like these coping skills, like ways that you just sort of rolled so that you could, I don't know if I'd call it coping skills, but ways that you could, I don't know what, fake it, manipulate, whatever, so you could kind of hide this?
100%. We all have ways of getting around things, and we're so good at people don't even catch on to what we're doing. Because we don't want to be caught. We don't want to be exposed. Oh, you're that kid, right? So we find ways around. All right, in class. All right, I'm the sixth person, so you're counting, how many sentences away. So you start studying. I had one guy in the foundation. He'd get called up in class. He'd walk up every single time he hit a kid back in the head, so he'd get kicked out of class, so he wouldn't have to read out loud.
Oh.
So we find ways around things very strategically in ways that nobody usually catches on.
They need to have a dyslexic in every public school to like spot that, don't you think?
I can spot them from a million miles away because I have,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
You can't catch something if you don't understand it. If I'm going,
right.
In Alaska, you obviously go hunting, with a fishing rod. How's that going to work out for you?
Right? I mean, but that would be so helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Because we just learn differently. And if someone could explain how you learn, that would be really helpful, right? So that's probably one of the things that you guys are working on doing.
Yeah.
I'd be interested. I'll have to go and check out the foundation because I'm just now trying to figure out really how I learned. I've always just done it, and never really known how.
Right.
But I do see how, because when I was in the dyslexic school, I got straight A's. They put me in public school, and I loved to learn when I was young. I loved to learn. I loved school. I went back to public school, and I got all C's after getting straight A's, and I thought, clearly I'm stupid. So then I started smoking. Then later I started drinking, and then the teachers would say what they said. So it was like, well, why not just start cussing? I was like 11 and doing all of these things because I couldn't. I felt like I couldn't do what I loved, which was learn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got 2 master's degrees now, so clearly I'm not stupid. But I didn't know how to do any of that back then. I had to figure, like, even in broadcasting, and maybe you can relate to this in hockey, I've never had a mentor. I've always done everything. Like when I did Morning Drive, I hosted it. I had to do everything. And people would always say, "Oh, I had this person that came alongside me." And I'm not trying to whine, but I maybe,
No.
like you said, just feeling misunderstood. Like I never had that person. I just did it all and tried to figure it all out. That sounds
Well,
like what you did.
and that's a little bit of a defense mechanism too, is
Yeah.
because we've been hurt and let down so many times that
Yeah.
we go and do it, right? That's another way of um, making sure it gets done, the way we needed it. Like, they never have a correlation. You're at a
Mm.
dyslexic school, so they were teaching you the way you need to be taught. And you put it in the school where they weren't. So they didn't have the correlation of the two, what was going on. You were being taught the way you were supposed to be and where your brain's wired. And they took you out of there and were teaching the wrong way. So they didn't see the correlation of the two.
Right. Right. So you're taking it all into our own hands so that nobody has to see that we don't know how to do it their way.
Yeah.
That's probably it. I just had to be in
Mm-hmm.
control of everything. So tell me so when did you realize, the alcohol, the drugs, when did that take over? What was that like for you? You know how they say in AA, where were you? What happened? Or in my case, what did God do? And where are you now?
Yeah.
And you can relate that to the dyslexia too, or just kids that are, families that are listening that just had whatever it is, mental health, abuse, anxiety, trauma, right? If I had this guy Chad Gaines on, he's getting ready they're making a movie about his life. I mean, his mother tortured him, and so literally torture, and so obviously he couldn't learn. Right. I mean, so, these are things that are all leading to addiction. So talk to me about sort of the intersection between addiction, mental health, and dyslexia, and how that played out for you and how you got sober.
Yeah. I was obviously, hockey was my only where I got my self-esteem, and I knew I didn't connect. So when I had my first beer when I was 5, my dad, tell me to go to the fridge, get him a beer, open it up. He didn't get a beer that wasn't unopened from me in my life. Loved it. Immediately loved the taste of it.
Okay, yeah, I think your dad having you get a beer when you were 5 might have been the first problem. I'm just saying.
Go to the fridge and go get me a beer. Just like he used to send me to the store.
I think
Go
that's
buy me a
where
cup
the
of
drama started. Anyway,
What?
sorry, continue.
Oh,
It's not funny. It's not funny, but
Not-
you have to laugh at the craziness of it.
Right. Just like back in the day, you could send me the note to the store and get them a couple packs of smokes. They used to do that, right? That was normal back then. And I loved it. Most kids wanted Kool-Aid. I knew I felt it. It touched me immediately. We know we're different, even though we don't know we're different. We know right away.
Yeah.
We know at a young age.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid that? And obviously, in the hockey world, alcohol was a big portion of hockey. Drinking, drugs didn't get bad till after I retired. I just did something for 40 years. No, I got nothing. And hockey wasn't my job. It was my life. It was my self-esteem. They took it away from me.
Yeah.
And that's when I went, down bad. I want to say it was a great rabbit hole. It was awesome. I loved it. I didn't have to feel the feelings. And, I ended up screwing up a buddy's, massive wedding. And my parents saw, for the first time, we went out to dinner the night before the wedding, and I had a bottle of vodka at dinner, and I went out. They're like, "What the fuck? What is this?"
Yeah.
So, screwed up the wedding. A couple of days later, walked into an intervention, and 24 hours later, I was in rehab, and here we are, 8.5 years later, something like that. But it
Awesome.
hockey
Oh my
exposed
gosh.
us.
We have to do a little clapping and cheering for you because that's a long time. That means that you're a miracle, Brent, because like I said, most of the people in my family that continue drinking are dead, unfortunately, so and so often we don't make it. And so you're a miracle. You're a miracle.
That's part of my journey, and every day is a new day, and keep moving forward here, and that's kind of my purpose is to help anybody any way I can, and with dyslexia or addiction or mental health, because I've lived it all, and God sent me on this path for a reason.
Absolutely. So tell me, what was the kind of some eye-opening things for you in recovery? And did you just basically go into recovery and you never drank again, or did you have a lot of relapses?
No, I haven't had a relapse.
Nice.
So for me, I got there on a Friday night. I was the only one in the house. Next morning, we went to an AA meeting, and they didn't tell me. They just said we're going to a meeting. We get there, and it's ends up being a Saturday morning men's meeting. Like, why is all these guys here? And they're like, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm like, I kind of heard this before. So the first speaker started telling a story, and it was the first time ever that there was some similarities.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I'm like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I don't remember what else was said that rest of the meeting. And, here we are, whatever, 8.5 years later.
Wow.
It's been an interesting journey, but feeling these feelings are hard.
Yeah.
So it's feeling the feelings and trying to understand what those feelings are. It's been interesting, that's for sure.
Wow. What would you say to someone dyslexic, right, that's turning to drugs and alcohol? You kind of, both of us have kind of put the pieces together, in the sense that one relates to the other and relates, to the other. And did you kind of put these pieces together when you were in rehab, or did that come later?
It started there. Obviously, you go in your recovery, you got to figure out why you got there, right? You start talking.
Yeah.
And hockey was over, and that's when I started kind of connecting these dots, and had to be sober to feel the feelings and sit with the feelings and understand the feelings. Yeah. And then start backtracking and putting pieces together. So a lot of the things you talk about today, I didn't understand until, when I started the foundation 7 years ago. I didn't know anything. So now it's all the understanding that I have is going back and how I got here and what does that mean. And it started that way. Dyslexia didn't matter. I didn't care about it because I had hockey. But you took that away from me, and then what did I have?
Yeah. And that's what led you on that journey. So I think it's putting the pieces together is the mindfulness piece is big too. I know it's a buzzword, but you got to sit with those feelings, and because in addiction, we're always bailing out. So that's why.
Right.
So people that they get into recovery, and like my brother, he would go on a date and relapse because he didn't have the skills, because he started bailing out when he was 12. So in recovery, we don't get to bail out. And that's, I think, the key is you don't get to bail out. You have to sit through the feelings. And when you do it the next time, it's not as hard, right? You're like, oh, wow, I feel better. And all I did was sit with my feelings, which is so stupid, but it's true,
100%. And I had to understand them. I'm sitting with, obviously, like you talked about, we ran from them.
Yeah.
But it was me sitting there with them, and what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, why? Where does that come from? So.
Right.
You got to feel them. You got to feel those feelings. They're not good.
Yeah.
Without understanding, and it's a different life when you're able to feel them and understand them.
Yeah, because a lot of times you get triggered. I would get triggered by authority figures, particularly for me, male authority figures. And I would get red. I'd have all this shame, and they would tell me that I'm wrong when I knew I was right. I was like a kid. Right. I was like a little baby, and I didn't understand what that was. And then I realized, oh my God, I'm 5. I'm 5. And this teacher or my dad or something. And then I had to like just grieve that, like grieve it. And now when it happens, I have to stop and go, oh, no, I'm not 5. Right? I put my pants on just like, yeah, I'm not 5. You don't get to trigger me. But we don't know. We don't know that, trigger means it just takes you all the way back and it feels real, right? It feels like you're in that school with that teacher, but you're not in the school with the teacher. And that's not true today, but it feels like it, right?
But then now we don't have triggers, we have understanding.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Brent, thank you so much for joining me. I don't want to keep you. Well, I've already kept you almost an hour. My goal is always 45 minutes, but it never happens.
I've been glad for a long time.
I know. I did want to ask you before we share with people how to connect with you. What was acceptance a big piece for you in this journey? By acceptance, we really mean not holding resentments, accepting, hey, I wish I was further along, but I'm not. There's nothing I can do. I wish I knew then what I knew now. I'm accepting it and moving. You know what I mean? Like I can't change it.
I love people like, so what would you tell your younger self? I always say nothing. This has been part of my journey. I had to get me here. And for acceptance for me is understanding.
Yeah.
I understand. Oh, that makes sense. And somebody can't help me if I can't understand myself. If they don't understand. So it's a lot of it starts with me is understanding, and then once that understanding comes acceptance.
Yeah. No, it's true. Did forgiveness play into that for you at all?
You have to. You have to forgive. Talking to my parents. Dyslexia back in the day. No, I don't. That was part of my journey. They didn't know. Most parents do the best they can with what they can. They don't. Right. They're not trying to cause you trauma.
Yeah.
That's not anybody's goal. They're doing the best they can with what they have at that time.
Yeah. So true. So Brent, give us some parting words for those listening, struggling, and then a bit about the foundation and how people can connect, get involved, those sorts of things.
Whoever you are, you're a gift from God, and you're beautiful.
Amen.
Cool. And love yourself. Don't try and be anybody else. Just love yourself. If you're able to love yourself fully, your life will be amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Tell me the website and any information about, we kind of covered that a little, what you guys are doing, but anything we might have missed and how.
SopelFoundation.org is a website, all types of information on dyslexia. You have questions, mental health, whatever it is, social media, or send me, email, because we touched on a lot of different things that most people don't talk about. There might be some dots connected. Feel free to reach out, and the foundation's always there for resources to help anybody that needs it.
Fantastic, and it's SOPEL Foundation. Did you say .org?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And that's in the comment section as well. So, Brent, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me time. Appreciate it. And again, for yourself and the listeners, always here to help. And the foundation, term is you're never alone.